Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Ever feel like history class skipped a few chapters? Like a lot of chapters? I'm talking about civilizations so ancient they make the pyramids look like yesterday's news. Get ready to have your minds blown because today we are diving deep into the pre-flood world, exploring the mysteries of antediluvian civilizations. We are talking ancient Egyptian chronicles that stretch back tens of thousands of years, possible Anunnaki connections in the Amazon, and the oldest mummies in the world. Let's dive in before another flood comes. The Old Egyptian Chronicle. Forget everything you thought you knew about ancient Egypt. According to a jaw-dropping document called the Old Egyptian Chronicle, Egyptian civilization stretches back an astonishing 36,000 years. Now, I know what you're thinking. Where is the proof? Well, the truth is, the original chronicle is mysteriously lost, but fear not, history buffs. A brilliant scholar named George Syncellus stumbled upon a copy centuries ago and used it to create a groundbreaking work called the Book of Sothis. This chronicle isn't your average history lesson. It is a mind-bending list of 30 dynasties ruling over 113 generations, spanning a staggering 36,525 years. Wait, what? These weren't your typical kings and queens. We are talking about beings who lived for thousands of years. The first dynasty, the Arites, were led by a sun god, Helios, who held onto power for a whopping 30,000 years. Talk about a long reign. Then came the sun god's children, who still enjoyed impressive lifespans, ruling for a combined 3,984 years. After that, things started to get a bit more human, with 8 demigods ruling for a mere 217 years. It's a strange story. An almighty being arrives on Earth, rules for eternity, has some kids, or maybe some clones, who knows, and their lifespans gradually shorten with each generation. This might remind you of the Sumerian king list, which has a somewhat similar story. After the Arites, the chronicle then introduces the Mesrates, descendants of these demigods who ruled for a more modest 443 years. Finally, we get to our familiar friends, the Egyptians. Dynasty after dynasty of them ruled the Nile, with each lasting around 100 to 200 years, much more in line with what we're used to. The last dynasty listed is the Tannites, which might refer to the ancient city of Tanis, but that's just speculation. Could this list be real? This sounds like pure fantasy, but could it be true? Could ancient Egypt have been ruled by gods long before humans ever appeared on the scene? Or is this a blend of mythology and history together? What do you think? Let me know your theories in the comments. The Anunnaki of the Amazon. While the Anunnaki are more closely associated with Mesopotamia and the Middle East, did you know they used to live in the Amazon jungles of Brazil as well? Each year, the ancient Cahokia tribe of the Brazilian jungle commemorates the arrival of a strange being who once resided in the Amazon. They call this being Bep Kororoti. Others call it an Anunnaki. According to the legend, Bep Kororoti came down from the Pukatoti Mountains and drew the tribes to him. Everyone was fascinated by the mystical stranger because he was wise and had skin that sparkled like diamonds. He didn't look anything like the locals. Bep Kororoti taught the natives things they had never known existed. He bestowed incredible knowledge onto them that helped the tribes advance their civilization. This seems like the Anunnaki agenda to a T. That's exactly what the ancient aliens did. They touched down somewhere in the world, seduced a local population of indigenous humans, and taught them cosmic wisdom and technological secrets. Astronaut theorist Eric von Daniken wrote about Bep Kororoti in his book on ancient aliens called Gods from Outer Space. There are many other experts besides Eric who know the tale and understand that the Amazonians were approached by an alien. It even wore a spacesuit. The folklore of the Cahokia tribe says that Bep Kororoti appeared dressed in a wicker suit. Ancient astronaut theorists believe they only said wicker because they had never seen a spacesuit before, but that you and I today would have undoubtedly recognized the being's suit as being something worn by an astronaut. That's a lot of assumptions, but okay. Every year, when the Kayapo tribe celebrates the ancient meeting, they choose one person to dress like the Anunnaki visitor and dance around. They wear a bulky suit made of wicker that is seriously reminiscent of our modern astronauts who walked on the moon. Let's keep going with the Amazonian mythology. The Kayapo supposedly lived with this being, the Anunnaki, for many years until one day it erupted in a fit of insanity. The being screamed and yelled, acting hysterical. It then ran away, and minutes later there was a massive explosion. The being escaped into the heavens, vanishing amid fiery clouds of smoke and thunder. This comes straight from the Kayapo. In 1952, ethnologist João Américo Peret questioned the elders of an Amazonian village and recorded the tale of Bet Kororoti. The elders said that the soil was shaken by the explosion so fiercely that the roots of plants jumped from the earth and part of the forest vanished. It sounds to some people that Bet Kororoti departed in a hurry inside a spaceship. There's no way of telling how far back this story goes. When did the Amazonians meet their first Anunnaki? Did they appear to the people of the jungle at the same time they were in Egypt or in Sumer? Who knows? And now for a quick break, because it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Emily Alagonero and Richard Razzo for supporting this channel. Thanks so much for watching and spending time with us. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. Was Jesus an alien? Jesus Christ of Nazareth was an alien. An archaeological discovery at a chapel in Scotland provided shocking DNA evidence that the Christian Messiah was an unknown species of creature from another world. What I'm about to tell you has not been verified by any mainstream source. You won't find this information in a peer-reviewed study published in a scientific journal, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not true. A joint team of Israeli and US scientists searched from Israel across Western Europe for holy relics. They didn't quite find anything of note until they arrived at Roslin Chapel in Scotland. There, they found the cross of Calvary, said to be the very cross upon which Jesus Christ was crucified. That is an amazing discovery if it's true. They didn't just find a sliver of the true cross. Archaeologists said they found the whole thing. The whole cross was hidden underneath the chapel, presumably put there by the Templars more than 700 years ago. When scientists started analyzing the cross, they found trace amounts of blood. It was enough blood to conduct a full DNA analysis. The results of the analysis showed something that shouldn't even be real. It shouldn't be physically possible. The DNA recovered from the blood on the cross was not the standard double helix DNA of modern human beings. The blood was triple helix DNA, one whole extra helix. The DNA belonged to a being which scientists have named Homo superioris. It's very similar to ordinary Homo sapiens with one big difference. These human-like creatures have paranormal abilities. They can levitate and heal very quickly, which is a little suspicious because wasn't Christ known for his healing miracles and walking on water? Homo superioris also have telekinetic abilities and telepathic abilities. This might be the most radical theory about the origin of Christ ever. And because the information isn't published in any big scientific journals, I can't confirm that any of it is true. I don't know if the true cross was found in one piece and is currently hidden somewhere. The theory goes on to state that Christ belonged to a race of superior humanoids dwelling in secret on Earth. After he was crucified, he slipped away using his powers and never appeared again. He had tried to preach a message of peace to the humans and was killed for it, and so the whole species remains in hiding to this day. What do you think? Could there really be a hidden race of superhumans living among us? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The oldest mummies in the world. History textbooks may need to be rewritten once again. Archaeologists may have just found the oldest mummies in the world, and they are not where you would expect them to be. You can guess all you want, but I don't think you'll get it, even if you have seen a lot of my videos. You definitely know about Egyptian mummies already. You may even be familiar with the ancient mummies discovered in South America. Up until now, the oldest mummies in the world were the Chinchorro mummies of Chile, dated at 7,000 years old. But they've just lost their spot. Human remains found in Portugal are on the cusp of being confirmed as the oldest mummies ever. They are a staggering 8,000 years old. They point to a mysterious civilization obsessed with mummification almost a full 4,000 years before the Egyptians. This is groundbreaking news. It's come as a big shock to historians and archaeologists around the world. Mummification seems to have begun in Portugal's Sado Valley, of all places. Researchers use a new method called archaeothanatology to confirm their findings. The forensic evidence was confirmed at a facility at Texas State University. It turns out this prehistoric culture had a very specific way of mummifying their dead friends. I have to warn you, it's a little ghoulish. They buried the dead with their knees bent and pressed tightly against their chest. When the corpse was put in the ground, they were bound tightly with rope, and as their body gradually dehydrated and shrank, it was dug up and the ropes were tightened. This process took a long time and a lot of effort. By continuously tightening the ropes as the dead person shriveled, they were compressed into a sort of mummified ball of bones. Tests showed that the flesh didn't decay after the burial. These ancient people preserved their dead perfectly. They did just as well of a job as Egyptian embalmers, using all their alchemical solutions and fancy bandages. But how? Or maybe the better question is, why? How old is this custom? Did it start in Portugal and then make its way to Egypt? What did these people believe in? We'll just have to wait and see. As more information comes out, I'll keep you posted. The civilization at the bottom of a lake. Imagine this. Scuba divers exploring a lost city beneath a serene lake in China. They weren't expecting to find an ancient pyramid, let alone one that might be older than the Egyptian pyramids. Let's dive deeper into this incredible archaeological discovery and try to unravel the secrets of the sunken Chinese pyramid. On June 13, 2006, archaeologists diving in Fuxian Lake stumbled upon something incredible. While searching for the ruins of Yuyuan, a city that vanished centuries ago, they discovered a pyramid, along with bizarre architectural structures and carvings unlike anything they'd ever seen. The carvings are truly baffling. Some depict strange, otherworldly beings with flat faces and spiky teeth, almost like demons. Even more perplexing, scientists believe they have deciphered binary code etched into the stone blocks. A computer language on an ancient underwater pyramid? It's enough to make your head spin. The mystery deepens when we consider the age of this underwater marvel. Scientists estimate it could be at least 1,800 years old, but some believe it's far older, potentially predating even the iconic pyramids of Egypt. So here's the million-dollar question. Who built this incredible underwater pyramid, and why is it submerged beneath the lake? How old do you think this sunken pyramid might be? Could it be evidence of a lost civilization more advanced than we ever imagined? Or perhaps a remnant of an extraterrestrial presence on Earth? This stone circle defies explanation. There are a lot of ancient stone circles out there, but this one is pretty impressive. The sheer size of the Stone Age monument just discovered in Poland is beyond imagination. Oh, and the ancient site isn't just 3 times bigger than Stonehenge, it is also much older. You're going to lose it when I tell you how the site was found. In 2015, a paraglider was flying through the air above northwest Poland when they looked down and saw some strange rings in a field. Paragliding would be cool on its own, but to realize you're paragliding over such a prehistoric landscape would be amazing. The rings looked kind of like crop circles. The paraglider reported what they saw to local archaeologists. In 2016, a researcher scrutinized satellite images on Google Earth. Sure enough, there were massive rings in the empty field like forgotten crop circles. 3 years later, experts from several universities in Poland started excavating. They knew that the circles were from something known as a roundel, but they didn't know how big it was going to be. Roundels are all over Poland, Germany, and the Czech Republic. Scientists have cataloged about 130 of them over the years, but there were likely way more during prehistory. Each roundel is a mystery because nobody knows what they were used for. Some say they served a ritualistic purpose. Others claim the roundels functioned as astronomical calendars, like Stone Age community clocks. While roundels are considered one of the greatest Stone Age mysteries of Europe, none of them ever gained much fame. They typically aren't very big, and so you don't hear people talking about them very much. That all changes today. The new roundel in Poland is being hailed as one of the most impressive prehistoric structures found anywhere in the world. But who built it? I don't know. I wish we could have seen this thing in its heyday because it was spectacular. Archaeologists identified a central area surrounded by 3 monumental gates. The monument was enclosed by 4 ditches, each one larger and deeper than the last. Picture Stonehenge but 3 times bigger and protected by moats. The project leader said that discovering the roundel is significant from both a historical and archaeological standpoint. He went as far as to call it sensational. Researchers believe it's at least 7,000 years old, making it 2,000 years older than Stonehenge. Could it have been built by the Druids of ancient England or another, even older culture? No one has any definitive answers, but I would like to show you this artist's mock-up of what the roundel may have looked like thanks to Anna Cebula. It doesn't look as impressive as Stonehenge in the picture, but you can still see this was an immense gathering place. We just don't know what they were gathering here for. The giants of prehistory confirmed. Looks like our family history just got a whole lot more interesting. Fossils in China have revealed the existence of prehistoric giants and what might just be the most important discovery of the century. These aren't the Nephilim of the Bible, but they might be their ancestors, in the same way Australopithecus is our ancestor. 2 scientists with a background in hominin fossils identified a new human ancestor. This stranger appeared on our family tree about 300,000 years ago. The scientists named the new species Homo juluensis. In Chinese, Julu means huge head. It's a reference to the giants' massive proportions. Their skulls were absolutely huge, way bigger than ours. Seriously, you could fit a small melon in there. The researchers didn't find anything new. The bones of this ancient specimen were recovered initially in the 1970s in China's northern region, but no one knew who the bones belonged to, so they were kept in a drawer for years for safekeeping. Then came Christopher Bay from the University of Hawaii and Xiu-Ji Wu from the Chinese Academy of Sciences. They dusted off the bones and started testing them. The pair had the fossils of 16 individuals to analyze, along with some stone tools and animal bones. The first thing was to date the specimens. They turned out to be roughly 200,000 years old, from the peak of the Ice Age, aka the last glacial maximum. This was a time when many archaic forms of humans wandered the world. There were different species living in Japan, Korea, and China, just to name a few. Our ancestors bred with one another so frequently that the fossil record is very confusing. Although there were many different human species, they didn't seem to have trouble making babies with each other. This resulted in the creation of hybrids and a lot of baffling fossils. What struck the researchers about the fossils they were testing was their size. The skulls measured up to 109 cubic inches. Now let's compare that to our own brains. The average Homo sapiens, yes, I'm looking at you, kid, has a skull size of 81 cubic inches. When talking such small measurements, a difference of 30 is massive. Homo juluensis, aka huge head humans, really did have huge heads. Even our Neanderthal cousins only had an average skull volume of 88 cubic inches, a bit bigger than our own, but still dwarfed by Homo juluensis. They must have had gargantuan brains. There is no doubt in the researchers' minds that they have uncovered a forgotten species on the human family tree, but they aren't looking at the full picture. Ancient alien enthusiasts and others are very excited that these prehistoric giants could have become the Nephilim of the antediluvian pre-flood world. Maybe humans and giants evolved next to each other, like tigers and cheetahs in Africa. Just 2 apex predators struggling for dominance. Is it that crazy of an idea? Let's not forget what ancient legends tell us about giants. In the pre-flood world, giants ruled everything. The Bible tells us that giants just about inherited the earth. They were only brought to ruin by the flood. Other old legends from North America to China talk of small groups of giants living in the post-flood world. These more recent giants kept to themselves, lived in caves, and generally avoided people. They knew their time was up. Amazingly, Chris and Wu have speculated that Homo juluensis lived in small groups and maintained a much smaller population than humans. Regular-sized humans, that is. This could explain why their fossils have never been found before. The experts also suggest that the giants may have gone extinct 120,000 years ago. Could that be the date of the real flood? Plus, Chris said it's possible some of their big-headed DNA survived inside of us. It could be inside of you right now, because the giants may have interbred with humans. Now, this is something the Bible suggests the Nephilim did before the flood. The Nephilim likely mixed with normal humans. Can you see the pieces falling into place here? There is, of course, still a lot more work to be done. Researchers think there could be other species of oversized humans that haven't been found yet. This is only the beginning of what might be a revolution in human history. Benjamin Franklin and the antediluvian world. Did you know that Benjamin Franklin was a bit of an oracle? In 1780, Benjamin wrote a letter to the English philosopher Joseph Priestley with a bizarre prediction for the future. His prediction was based on the antediluvian world of the past. Benjamin Franklin was very optimistic about humanity. At the end of the 18th century, he was aware of how fast science was progressing. He began his letter to Joseph saying that he was sad to be born so soon. He would not be alive to see the true scientific potential of humanity. Benjamin Franklin then stated that within 1,000 years, human beings would increase their life expectancy tenfold. He was certain that people would be able to live for 10 full centuries, a full 1,000 years. Would you even want to live that long? This wasn't a number he pulled out of a hat. Benjamin's proposal for the future longevity of humans came from the Bible. He was inspired by the supposed longevity enjoyed by biblical patriarchs in the Old Testament. Noah, Jared, Seth, Adam, they all had one thing in common. They lived for longer than 900 years. In the Bible, the term antediluvian refers to the time before the flood. The Bible says that before God flooded the world to get rid of those pesky giants, human beings lived for a crazy long time. Enhanced lifespans aren't something that only appear in the Bible. As you learned before, the Egyptians may have been descendants of people who lived for thousands of years. The old Egyptian chronicle is just like the king list of the Sumerians, which details the same thing. The Sumerian king list is a catalog of Mesopotamian kings who lived in excess of 1,000 years each. Humans have come up with a lot of cool inventions since Benjamin Franklin's day, but we haven't quite cracked immortality yet. Who knows? Maybe one day we will live like Adam and Noah. We need to reclaim whatever lost technology allowed ancient people to live so long. The truth behind the Anunnaki. Aliens, gods, kings, genetic experiments, or ancient myths. What is the truth of the Anunnaki? In the earliest writings of the Sumerians 5,000 years ago, the Anunnaki are gods. They were not that different from the gods of Olympus. The Anunnaki were born from the union between the ultimate god of the heavens, An, and the goddess of the earth, Ki. This was almost identical to the gods of Olympus being born from Kronos and Gaia. According to the Sumerians, the primary function of the Anunnaki was to dictate the fate of humanity. They weren't on Earth to prosper, mine for gold, or play games. Their prime directive was to guide the humans into a future of prosperity. Here's a secret. The word Anunnaki can be translated as princely seed. The Anunnaki were not the supreme creators. They were the seeds of the supreme creator. Historians have been trying to figure out how long the Anunnaki were worshipped, but they keep hitting a dead end. Something a lot of people don't realize is that the Anunnaki were likely not worshipped as a pantheon until much later in Sumerian history. The first use of the term Anunnaki is in an inscription from 2144 BC, written during the 3rd dynasty of Ur, under the leadership of King Gudea. For 1,000 years before that, the Anunnaki were not a complete group. There were more than 50 Anunnaki, each one its own unique divinity. Each one was usually associated with a specific city and even a specific animal. Many of the Anunnaki were depicted as anthropomorphic beings. Some were associated with their own star or planet. The goddess Inanna was closely associated with Venus, while Utu was connected with the sun. Around 2100, the various gods ruling over the cities of Mesopotamia started to be grouped under one umbrella, the Anunnaki. But what does this mean? Were they ancient aliens who visited planets and created human beings to be their slaves? That is a popular theory, but there isn't any description like that in the Sumerian records. It might be true, I don't know. I'm just telling you that the Sumerians never said such a thing. British conspiracy theorist David Icke claimed the Anunnaki were reptilian overlords who enslaved humanity. David even said that the Aryan race, popularized by the Nazis, descended from the Anunnaki, and apparently the world is still controlled by them today. Mainstream scholars associate the Anunnaki with the gods of ancient Greece. There are a lot of similarities between them, too many to ignore. Each Anunnaki god was the master of a certain element, just like the Olympians. There was Enlil, god of the air, Enki, god of water, and Ninhursag, goddess of the mountain. There's one more theory I need to share with you. Since each Mesopotamian city seemed to have its own Anunnaki or god, maybe the Anunnaki were indeed alien rulers. Maybe that's why every city had one. And maybe after 4000 BC, the Anunnaki were gone, and that was why they got grouped into one pantheon of gods. They had ruled cities, and then they left to go back to their planet. This Peruvian pyramid is crazy. A pyramid in Peru is yet another connection to the world of ancient aliens. When archaeologists discovered this pyramid recently, they were shocked for two reasons. First, the pyramid is far older than it has any right to be, and second, it holds a dark and violent secret. I take you now to the Sechin Archaeological Project, a site in Peru's northern province of Casma. The site is at least 5,000 years old, maybe even a little older. It was the center of a mysterious civilization known only as the Sechin. Keep in mind that Sechin wasn't what they called themselves, it's just a name given to them by modern archaeologists. We have no clue what they used to call themselves. In fact, this is true for most ancient civilizations. It's something you should always keep in mind. Take the Minoans, for example. Nobody knows what they called themselves. They were only named the Minoans by an archaeologist who connected them to King Minos from the old Greek legends. Anyway, getting back on track, little is known about the Sechin civilization, but this pyramid they built can give us clues. Experts believe it could be the first monumental building anywhere in the Americas. The Sechin may have even been the first known civilization to prosper in Peru's Andes Mountains. They were around at least 4,500 years before the Inca Empire. Let that sink in for a second. There was as much time between the Inca and the Sechin as there is between us and Pharaoh Khufu, who built the Great Pyramid. Archaeologists had to dig very deep to find the structure. They excavated about 18 feet beneath the surface of the ancient site. Even though the pyramid was clearly huge, it still managed to get completely buried. The design was found to be highly unusual as well. The pyramid was built from massive slabs of stone stacked into stairs. It's similar to a step pyramid, like a Mesopotamian ziggurat, but has its own local style. It's difficult to put into words how peculiar, but also familiar, the Peruvian pyramid is. Okay, but what was it for? What was that dark secret I mentioned earlier? At first, archaeologists believed that the pyramid was the seat of a local government. They thought maybe it was like a giant throne to a king or a queen. However, the more they investigated, the more things took a sinister turn. Archaeologist Monica Suarez, who coordinated the excavation, said the pyramid likely served a ceremonial purpose. It resembles buildings used for blood sacrifices in other parts of the Americas. There are two skulls on the pyramid, one belonging to an adult and the other to a child. The other clues are even more brutal. For example, a dismembered skeleton. The skeleton belonged to somebody who had his or her limbs removed while they were still alive. I can't begin to imagine the horror of being literally ripped apart. What kind of bloody rituals were these people conducting? Archaeologists think the sacrifices could have taken place at the top of the pyramid, but the investigation is still ongoing. At this point, you might be wondering what dismembered skeletons and a buried pyramid have to do with ancient aliens. It all comes down to coincidence. You know that pyramids are all over the world, and we've established that there are pyramids that predate those in Egypt. It is possible that every known pyramid is connected, each one related to an original civilization. This origin culture might even predate the Ice Age. People may have been building pyramids for tens of thousands of years, inspired by the Anunnaki or other extraterrestrial visitors. What are your thoughts on civilizations that predate our own? I want to know what you think, so be sure to leave a comment and remember to subscribe if you haven't already.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. The Great Flood of Gunyu. Ancient Chinese historical texts claim civilization began in 2000 BC, when Emperor Yu founded the Xia dynasty. Right before this happened, there was a mighty flood. The Yellow River broke and the territories of Emperor Yao were devastated. Crops were destroyed by the flood and entire villages were washed away. People fled desperately to escape the deadly waters, seeking shelter on mountaintops and in caves. But unfortunately, the flooding went on for 9 long years. During those 9 years, the emperor was helpless to stop the endless floods from destroying his people. He appointed the young Prince Gun to deal with the issue, but when he didn't make any headway, Gun was killed and replaced by his own son, Yu. Legend has it that instead of trying to contain the flood, Yu brilliantly diverted it. He ordered new channels to be dredged so that the floodwaters would slowly drain away. It took him 13 years to redirect the floodwaters, but once he was done, he'd transformed a flooded China into a bountiful region with rich, watery soil. And when he became emperor, Chinese civilization began. It's unclear how much of this story is true. However, archaeologists have verified that based on sediments along the Yellow River, a flood did occur around 1900 BC. It may have also been just as bad as the legends say it was. Researchers think the catastrophe was one of the biggest freshwater floods of the past 10,000 years. It was likely caused by an earthquake that triggered a landslide which blocked the upper section of the river. It created a natural dam with water building up behind it for about a year. Then, when the natural dam finally burst, it resulted in catastrophic floods. And as a result, the lower plains were inundated with water for 22 years. There are no records for how many people died or how ravaged the civilization was, but legend does suggest that all those living along the Yellow River suffered from disease, famine, and displacement. And now for number 6. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Nicola Brown and Caleri for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about amazing discoveries, or dinosaurs, or ancient civilizations. We've got it all. The Tartessos. Starting around 2,500 years ago, a powerful civilization appeared in southwestern Spain. They were so sophisticated and technologically advanced that they rivaled the Greeks on the other side of Europe. This civilization was called Tartessos, and the people living there were fantastic shipbuilders and excelled in metalwork. They also have some tenuous links to the civilization of Atlantis. However, Tartessos suddenly vanished without a trace, and nobody knows what happened to it. Some think the civilization was washed into the sea by a flood. The exact meaning of the word Tartessos is unknown and speculative. Biblical scholars believe the city's real name was Tarshish, which was mentioned in the Book of Ezekiel and the Book of Kings. It was said to be a powerful city that produced gold and silver and sold its wares to King Solomon. But other ancient sources called Tartessos a city, not a civilization. Greek geographer Strabo said it was a city in Iberia with a rich culture of literature. Ancient historian Herodotus said it was a fully blown kingdom ruled by a wise king named Arganthonios. Herodotus also described Tartessos as being located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, or the Strait of Gibraltar as it's otherwise known. Oddly enough, that's the exact same place that Plato claimed Atlantis was located before it was destroyed by a flood. The truth of Tartessos remains elusive to this day, but there is still plenty of archaeological evidence to give scholars a good idea of who they were and what happened to them. Historians have found artifacts and ruins in the Tartessos region of Spain that date back to about 1200 BC. The civilization certainly existed. They were heavily influenced by the Phoenicians, even using the Phoenician alphabet, but some have suggested it wasn't a civilization at all, but merely an outpost of the Phoenicians. There are over 20 sites associated with Tartessos in Spain, everything from cities to places of animal sacrifice. but there has never been any trace found of military power. With the Carthaginians being so active in the region starting around the 5th century BC, they may have destroyed the defenseless Tartessos society. However, others think it had more to do with a natural disaster, a flood that pushed Tartessos into the sea, just like Atlantis. Cahokia. Did a megaflood destroy the ancient American city of Cahokia? One of the biggest cities the ancient world ever saw came into being on the edge of the Mississippi River in modern-day St. Louis 1,000 years ago. It was called Cahokia, and it was potentially the greatest Native American city ever constructed. But 300 years after it was founded, the city was gone. And new research has shown Cahokia may have flooded thanks to a disaster on the Mississippi River around the year 1200. The abrupt disappearance of Cahokia has remained one of the biggest mysteries in American archaeology for years. It's just as baffling as the Anasazi of the Southwest, who disappeared abruptly around the same time. But now, students from the University of Wisconsin believe they have the answers. A team led by Samuel E. Munoz studied sediment cores from Horseshoe Lake, right beside the site of Cahokia, and the sediment revealed proof of biblical-level flooding just as the city was reaching its peak of power. But how do sediment cores reveal evidence of ancient floods? The team looked at the various layers of silt and clay deposited at the bottom of the lake. Horseshoe Lake separated from the Mississippi River about 1,700 years ago, and its layers of sediment act like the rings in a tree, giving snapshots of what happened year by year. For example, looking at pollen deposits in the sediment revealed a sudden boom in farming starting about 450 AD. The farming was followed by a rapid period of deforestation, and this correlates directly to humans settling in the area and starting agriculture. The deposits also showed that corn cultivation reached its height between the years 900 and 1200. Then, by 1350, all agricultural activity had ceased. The next layer is the most shocking. The team discovered a 9.5-inch thick deposit of silty clay that was left behind by a sudden flood. When a flood of that magnitude takes place, it's evident because it leaves its mark by churning up all the soil. And judging by the size of the deposit, the floodwaters were huge. Researchers think the flood surge was over 10 stories tall, big enough to utterly destroy Cahokia. It's likely that the water destroyed all the crops, making it impossible for a large population to sustain themselves in a city, and this caused a mass exodus, forcing the Native Americans out of Cahokia. The Black Sea Deluge. The Black Sea Deluge hypothesis was proposed by scientist William Ryan and his colleagues in 1997. The hypothesis says that the Black Sea was created by a catastrophic flood which pushed water from the Mediterranean Sea inland to grow the Black Sea. William Ryan suggested the Great Flood took place about 7,600 years ago. Many supporters of the theory think this hypothetical event could have been the basis for the global flood myth found in the Bible. The idea is that prior to 5600 BC, the Black Sea was a vast freshwater lake fed by glacial meltwater because of the end of the Ice Age. But as the glaciers from the Ice Age dwindled, the rivers started to go dry. Some of them shifted course and started draining into the North Sea or into the Mediterranean. And at some point, the Mediterranean burst. An estimated 10 cubic miles of water poured through a channel and into the Black Sea. To understand how much water that is, it equals about 200 times more than the flow of Niagara Falls. It was a catastrophic flood that resulted in the creation of the Black Sea, which before had only been a small lake. But after the flood, it turned into an actual sea, just like the Mediterranean. The deluge not only created a sea, but it also devastated the surrounding area. Imagine all that water flooding a vast chunk of the ancient world. This was a place where early humans were living in primitive villages and sleeping in caves. Civilization was on the cusp of starting. But this flood would have been absolutely horrific for everyone living in the area. It would have washed away entire early civilizations into the bottom of the Black Sea, and those who survived the destruction may have thought the whole world was flooded, hence the creation of the biblical flood myth. The theory picked up steam in the late 1990s and even headlined in the New York Times. This prompted a team of marine archaeologists to dive into the Black Sea in search of evidence of destroyed civilizations. and they found what looked like an ancient shoreline dotted by human construction. They uncovered timber buildings at about 330 feet deep that had likely stood at the edge of the Black Sea when it was only a small lake. But sadly, when that floodwater came, the people had nowhere to go. How many civilizations do you think were wiped out by this ancient flood? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're at it, be sure to subscribe. Flooding in the Sahara. The Sahara Desert is the biggest desert on the planet, smaller only than the cool deserts of Antarctica and the Arctic. It covers 8 different modern countries, including Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. It's a hot and inhospitable wasteland, but it may have once been covered in water. Scientists know that it was covered in water during the dinosaur age, but there may have been a much more catastrophic levels that changed the landscape forever. Let's start with what scientists know for sure. 11,000 years ago, the Sahara Desert was unrecognizable. It was a fertile place of lakes, rivers, and forests. And archaeologist David Wright believes the transition from beautiful wet forests to dry hellscape happened because of humans and goats. David's theory is that when humans brought their domesticated animals to the desert 8,000 years ago, their goats ate up all the grass. This reduced the amount of atmospheric moisture, which means there were less clouds. The lack of moisture triggered a sudden change in climate that stopped the rain from falling, and within 4,000 years, the Sahara dried up almost completely. Going back even further, it's possible that the reason the Sahara was so lush 11,000 years ago was that it flooded 1,000 years earlier. Around 14,000 BC, floodwaters may have poured over the Sahara and destroyed a mysterious civilization living there. And conspiracy theorists have put forth a lot of potential evidence for a Saharan flood. One piece of potential evidence is the Sahara ripples. These are ripples seen from satellite images across huge sections of the desert. They look like marks left by powerful waters sweeping across the sand. But mainstream scientists say those are nothing but ordinary sand dunes. But then there's the Eye of the Sahara, a geological structure that some have proposed is, in fact, the ruins of the city of Atlantis. The theory is that 12,000 years ago, a brief but powerful flood swept across the Sahara, completely destroying Atlantis. The flood left nothing behind except the scars on the desert where the city once stood. But according to mainstream scientists, that idea is nothing but a fantasy. They say the Eye of the Sahara is a natural volcanic dome. Still though, their claims haven't stopped others from creating their own explanations for the bizarre geological structure. The London Beer Flood. The London Beer Flood didn't destroy any civilizations, but it did kill at least 8 people. On October 17, 1814, a horrible disaster unfolded in the city of London. An industrial accident unleashed a flood of beer onto the streets around Tottenham Court Road, causing widespread destruction. It wasn't just a little bit of beer either. It was a very real tsunami that washed people away. The accident revolved around the Horseshoe Brewery, which stood at the edge of Tottenham Court Road and Great Russell Street. In 1810, the brewery installed a massive wooden fermentation tank with 22-foot walls. The tank was held together using massive iron rings, and the vat within was capable of containing about 3,500 barrels of porter ale. Then, during the afternoon hours on the day in question, one of the iron rings broke, and roughly an hour later, the whole tank ruptured. Hot fermenting ale was unleashed from the tank with such incredible force that the back wall of the brewery was shattered. The force of the blast ripped apart other storage tanks, setting free about 320,000 gallons of beer. The single tank blew apart and caused a chain reaction, and all that beer was released down the street like floodwaters flowing through a narrow canyon. This particular part of London was known as St. Giles Rookery. It was densely populated, an old London slum full of cheap lodgings and homeless people. And this was where the poor, the destitute, and the criminal resided. Most of the time, they would have been happy to have some free beer, but in this case, it came to them in a wave that was about 15 feet tall. The flood decimated the neighborhood. Basements of houses were flooded, and entire apartments collapsed. Two of the victims were Mary Banfield and her daughter Hannah. They were sitting down for some afternoon tea when they suddenly found themselves drowning in beer. In the basement of another house, there was a wake happening for a young Irish boy who'd perished the day before. 4 of the people who showed up for the wake drowned in brown porter ale. Amidst the devastation, there were those who couldn't resist a free drink. People supposedly ran into the streets with mugs, trying to scoop up as much free beer as they could, and they did this while people's bodies floated in the foam. An unsubstantiated report claimed that the 9th victim came the day after the flood, when they died from alcohol poisoning. Petra washed away. The ancient city of Petra was the capital of the mighty desert people known as the Nabateans. They accumulated incredible wealth by trading with their neighbors in Europe, mainly the Greeks and the Romans, and their city of Petra soon became an economic hub for the world. It was a mighty trading post with its own unique culture and a healthy political landscape. But in 312 BC, the Greeks sacked the city. The Nabateans survived, but not for very long. In 106 AD, the city was attacked again, but this time by the Romans. They did even more damage than the Greeks had. They annexed the entire territory and renamed the area Arabia Petraea. And unfortunately, the Roman occupation was the beginning of the end for Nabatean culture. Following the conquering of Petra by Rome, the city thrived for another 250 years. Then, in the middle of the 4th century, people began to leave. Researchers think there was a devastating earthquake that caused an exodus from the city, and soon after, the whole place was abandoned. It's always been a bit of a mystery why a simple earthquake would cause such a powerful capital to be forsaken. But scientists are now thinking that Petra may have been devastated by a flash flood. In 2017, archaeologists discovered beds of white sandstone along the edges of Petra. It was really strange because the valley doesn't contain any white sandstone. It's only found a fair distance away at the top of a hill. Researchers think the white sandstone was carried from the hill down into Petra when it flooded. Now, the hypothesis is that Petra wasn't abandoned because of a little earthquake. A devastating flash flood sent water spilling into the city, potentially drowning thousands of people. Researchers have estimated the floodwaters filled the valleys and canyons of Petra, leaving the people with no route of escape. Thanks for watching. Do you think a flood could destroy our civilization in the near future? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!